There are certain guardians in life whose presence you expect. The rumbling watchdog at the gate, the sturdy barn cat, keeping mice at bay, the weathered scarecrow trying its best to look bold. And then, sometimes, there's a chicken. Not a metaphorical one, a real, feathered, waddling chicken, who didn't just cluck and peck, but who patrolled a garden as though it were her kingdom, as though every tomato leaf was sacred, and in a quiet, moss-lined town, tucked somewhere in Oregon. Folks still speak of her in that slightly hushed tone usually reserved for grandparents and hometown heroes. They say she stood down a fox. They say she once guarded bees. They say she had the eyes of a soldier and the loyalty of a dog. Her name was Matilda, a Buff Orpington, and not the fanciest of feathers, not the sharpest of beaks, but with a posture that made you straighten your own back just a little. She arrived in a cardboard box, like all chicks do, warm, nervous, cheeping like static through straw. One of 6, chosen by a family who wanted eggs and the charm of cluckery gardeners, not farmers. But from the moment she stepped out of her box, there was ... something. The others huddled or tottered uncertainly, bumping into corners, squabbling under the heat lamp. Matilda watched, not lazily, not with that blank, soft-eyed bobble of most chicks, but with stillness, head tilted, body quiet, as though already measuring the world around her. It wasn't long before they joked she was their sentinel. That was Lena's word. She'd just turned 11. The thoughtful kind of kid, the one who reads books upside down to finish faster, who names garden snails and whispers sorry when pulling weeds. She had wanted a dog instead. She got hens, but she noticed first how Matilda would root herself between the other chicks and the open garden gate, how she'd fluff and stand tall when the hose snapped to life, pecking it, like it dared to startle her family, how she'd pace before dusk, making small, guttural coos when shadows shifted. It was ridiculous at first, a chicken standing guard. But then the hose was chased, and then a squirrel skittering near the lettuce bed found itself flapped at once and never returned. And then one cool night in spring, a low, strange warble came through the monitor. Matilda's and Caleb found raccoon prints near the coop, but nothing touched the eggs. There's bravery, and then there's instinct, the kind that doesn't think to run or even assess odds. It just acts because it must. By summer, the neighbors had a name for her, the garden sentinel. I saw her staring down a cat, someone said. She pecked at a drone, said another. Never seen a bird move like that. Body low, eyes locked. They say our protectors are defined by strength muscle, claws, a bark. But what if it's none of those? What if it's simply the ability to watch the world with care, to stand between what grows and what threatens? What if all it takes is a fierce heart in a feathered chest? If courage wore boots, we'd call them heroes. Matilda wore none. She walked barefooted through Kale Rose, into the pages of town memory, and she never blinked when she stood guard. When Matilda was barely a week old, she did something that would worry and amuse the family all at once. They had just brought the chicks home, cardboard box in hand, with names already brewing on Lena's tongue. Names like Daisy, Nutmeg, Clementine, the kind that sound like spring and spices. It was a mild April morning, with mist curling off the grass, like the town itself wasn't quite ready to wake. The coop wasn't finished yet, so the chicks lived temporarily in a warm brooder next to the sunroom window, a glass haven filled with clover starts and tomato seedlings. The other chicks chirped and trampled over each other instantly. They tumbled, feathers fluffed, half in fear, half in wonder. But Matilda stood at the edge of the brooder, 2 toes perched on the cardboard lip, staring outward like she was already counting paces, already planning some future patrol. "She looks like she's waiting for something," said Lena, crouching down beside her. "Probably waiting for breakfast," Caleb chuckled, sprinkling crumble feed. But it wasn't food. That wasn't the hunger behind those dark, glinting eyes. It was watchfulness. A surprising stillness for something so new to life. Days passed, and patterns emerged, while the others clustered under the heat lamp. Chirping like wind-up toys, Matilda often strayed alone, not wandering anxiously, but moving with clear shadows, toward noises, toward edges. Lena began to notice small things. Details easy to ignore, but impossible to miss once seen. The way Matilda always placed herself between the other chicks, and the open doorway whenever someone entered the room. How she would tilt her head slowly beyond the bobble sight of most hens and freeze, as if she was cataloguing the sounds of the house. She never startled easily. Not like the others, who scattered like leaves at loud noises or flits of passing motion. Matilda seemed to catalogue every variable, as though drawing the mental map of a sentinel. And then came the first incident with the garden hose. Nora turned on the spigot in the early evening while the chicks were outside for their first supervised peck of grass. A burst, a hiss, a sudden flick of green tail as the coiled hose sprang to life. Every chick ran. Every chick but Matilda. She turned, stared, took 3 deliberate steps forward, and pecked it. Not out of panic or even curiosity, just defiance. She puffed her feathers and pecked again, until the twisting serpent of a hose stopped unraveling. "She thinks it's a threat," Lena murmured, wide-eyed. "She's a chicken." Caleb laughed. But in Lena's notebook later that night, across a drawing of a garden gnome and a cucumber vine, she wrote 4 words in blocky print. "Matilda protects the garden." It wasn't just the hose. By the next week, Matilda had begun marching a pattern from the herb patch to the edge of the strawberry lanes anytime the chicks were let out. One afternoon, Lena watched as a squirrel scampered too close to the lettuce beds. Instantly, Matilda lurched forward in a strange side hop, wings slightly out like makeshift shields. The squirrel actually froze, then darted back up the tree. It didn't come down again that day. "You should have seen her, Mum." She goose-stepped it right back to its branch. Lena beamed. "Well, she's got brass feathers," Nora said with a wink. "We'll start calling her General Cluck." But the name wouldn't stick, because something quieter, more reverent, had already begun to form around her. One evening, as the sky turned tea-stained and amber over the hills, Caleb was tinkering with a leak in the lower corner of the greenhouse. The chicks were back in the brooder inside, and the family had just sat down to dinner. Then came that raspy, almost growling cluck, a half warble, like a foghorn run through a feathered throat. It came from the baby monitor they'd left in the sunroom, mostly to monitor the heat lamp. "Lena dropped her fork, Matilda," she said, standing up. Caleb and Nora exchanged an amused glance, but followed Lena to the front door. Flashlight in hand, Caleb scanned the lawn. There were marks near the garden gate. Small, pawed, pressed into the soft earth with faint claw trails. "Raccoon," he muttered, but everything inside the brooder was untouched. Even the curious Clementine sat sound asleep like she'd missed the memo, except Matilda, who was standing, fully upright at the corner of the enclosure, body turned square to the window, as though she'd seen everything, as though she had warned them after that night. Things shifted. Matilda wasn't just the oddball chicken anymore. She was the one who saw. Lena started spending more time outside with her, more than with the other chicks. While the others picked at lettuce leaves or chased gnats with the concentration of tiny, silly minds, Matilda shadowed Lena like a dutiful assistant. "She heals," Lena joked once, and it was almost true. If Lena moved right, Matilda followed, 2 steps behind. If Lena stopped suddenly, Matilda would Facebook pose, head angled in strange elegance, surveying the garden as though inspecting troops. More than once, Lena whispered secrets into her fluff, whispers of school, where things weren't always kind, where her small voice disappeared sometimes in the louder hum of preteen noise. Whispers of feeling a little bit weird, and more than a little bit lonely. Matilda never interrupted, never clucked back, just stood close in time. The family grew used to their smallest companion, acting more watchdog than egglier. A week before summer officially broke, something quietly miraculous occurred. Matilda stopped short at a patch of wild chamomile. She raised her wings again, not wide, but firm, like a wall. Lena thought she was stretching, until she moved forward again, and Matilda blocked her path with her chest. Confused, Lena stepped left. Matilda sidestepped with her. A low hum began. A knot from the chicken, a bee, then another, then a cluster rising into a drifting, disoriented swarm right at the edge of the flower bed. Inches from where Lena was headed, they moved past them harmlessly. Pollinators, not attackers, but Matilda never broke eye contact with the swarm. Only after the last bee vanished into the hedge did she step aside. "Okay," Lena whispered. "You win." Later that night, she left out a fat strawberry from her desert just for Matilda. Let Clementine chirp jealously all she wanted. That night went down in Lena's journal too. She titled the page, "The Bee Guard," and beneath it, she wrote, "A brave heart doesn't need to flap. It only needs to know when to stand." By the end of May, it wasn't just the family watching Matilda with new eyes. The neighbors, kids came to peer through the fence. One wearing a scooter helmet whispered, "She doesn't even blink." And Lena, who had never been very social, said simply, "She's the garden's shadow." They told stories about her after that, the kind children create from tiny truths and bright imaginations. She chased away a drone. She bowed to a THUNDERCLOUD. She pecked a plastic bunny clean off a flower pot that dared sit where she stood. And in their backyard, beneath the driftwood sign that Nora painted clucking impalas, stood a chicken, golden dash feathered, impossibly aware, beak tilted toward the horizon, watching, always watching. Lena didn't notice right away when it started, maybe because it didn't begin with anything loud or cinematic. No flapping fanfare, no sudden rescue. It was just there, quietly, like a thread tying one soft thing to another. Matilda had simply begun walking beside her. Not always, and not in perfect sync, but often enough. If Lena crunched through gravel on her way to the garden bench with a book, so did the small gold hen 2 steps behind. If she sat by the compost bin to watch pillbugs turn over leaves, Matilda nestled close, quiet but alert, always slightly angled, as if guarding the side Lena never thought to protect. "She thinks she's your sheepdog," Nora said, watching from the porch one afternoon, arms crossed with a bemused smile. "She listens better than a dog," Lena replied. Then added with a grin, "Sometimes." She had started training her, half in play, half in earnest. Matilda, Heal, she'd say, with mock seriousness, sand for her own private joke, because she'd read once that hens couldn't really follow commands like that. But Matilda seemed to respond, always lagging a beat behind but ending up where Lena asked her to be. Once, after hearing footsteps on gravel that didn't belong, Matilda trotted to Lena's side and planted herself, firm chest out, eyes narrowed toward the fence. It had only been the neighbor's cat, but that didn't seem to matter. Matilda had noticed first, and Lena. She'd noticed that Matilda always did. The spring deepened, the garden thickened, and Lena found herself holding court in her own quiet wane, not to classmates or counselors, but to a hen who seemed to know the value of silence. Under the climbing trellis, she told Matilda about the boy at school who'd mimicked her high voice until she stopped answering questions in science class, about the packed lunch she tried to trade but couldn't, about how it felt invisible sometimes, like the world noticed only the loud, only the flashy, never the quiet girl who named worms and talked to sunflowers. Matilda never squawked, never blinked too fast or turned away. She just stayed near, always facing the place Lena's words landed, eyes trained on some invisible horizon beyond hurt feelings and awkward silences. Nora began to notice, too. Not with grand statements, but with subtle shifts. The way Lena started offering to water the far beds with the hose, instead of wrinkling her nose at bugs. The way she tucked in her own shirt tails and stood slightly straighter. The way she said Matilda's watching as a reason to try braver things. She makes me braver, Lena whispered once, during a particularly blue afternoon, like she'd be disappointed if I didn't at least ... try. And that was the strange magic of it. Matilda gave no pep talks, never clucked encouragement. She simply existed with intensity, a gentle, charged presence that held Lena steady when her feet wanted to flee. One morning, just as dew was curling off rose petals and the sky was all watercolor orange, something remarkable happened again. Matilda stopped right in front of Lena's favorite flowerbed zinnias, and wild minthand wouldn't move. At first, Lena thought she was being dramatic, tired maybe, or stubborn in that odd chicken way. Matilda, come on, she said, nudging forward, boots brushing soft earth. But Matilda stood firm, wings slightly puffed, eyes unblinking. Matilda, she repeated. She tried to step around. Matilda moved with her. It happened twice more. Left, right. Matilda shifted, never aggressive, just ... firm. Okay. Seriously, what? That's when she heard it, a low, murmuring hum, rising like something alive from the other side of the flower bed. The bees, not the calm kind, not pollinating gently like tiny winged monks, but swarming disoriented from what would later turn out to be a damaged hive knocked sideways by wind. Lena froze, breath caught. The hum passed, weaving like a thread through sunshine and air. Barely a foot from her face, Matilda never flinched, standing solid between her charge and the drift of buzzing life. Matilda held position until every last beat had vanished. Over the fence line, Lena didn't speak for a full minute. Then, very softly, she said, "You have no idea how weird you are," and placed her hand gently over Matilda's back. That afternoon, she brought a strawberry juicy and read and placed it like a royal offering on the coop step. Lena only told Nora later, in a whisper, like it was sacred. She knew. "Before I even saw them," who asked Nora, "the bees." And then she added, "She puts herself between me and things. It's just what she does." After that, the rituals deepened. Lena would whistle a kind of two-part note, not unlike a bird call, before heading into the tall hedgerows. Matilda would follow. That whistle became their language. If Matilda was scraping dirt near the fava beans and heard it, she'd lift her head and waddle over instantly, almost annoyed to be summoned but unwilling to ignore it. The neighbors started to notice, too. A boy with glasses and a bright green bike helmet asked one afternoon, "Can all chickens do that?" "Nope," Lena said, "too fast." Then quieter, "Just this one." They played a game after Stealth Chicken. Whoever could sneak past Matilda to the swing set without her noticing won a candy bracelet. "No one ever won twice. She sees everything," said a girl named Zoe, eyes wide. "Like she has 13 eyes. Like she's reading your footsteps," said her brother. They tried to train one of their own, Hensemuffin. Muffin mostly dug holes and fell asleep in flower pots. No one was surprised, because by now Matilda wasn't just Lena's chicken. She was a story, a feathered legend in the making. The garden sentinel, yes, but to Lena, she was something even better. She was the friend who stood between her and the lonely dot, without ever saying a word. It started, as many things do in the country, with the odd flicker of a light. The garden lamp by the rosemary bush twitched once, blinked off, then on again, faintly, like a sleepy eye, unsure it needed to wake. Caleb muttered something about loose wiring, but by the third evening in a row, it was clear. Something wasn't quite right. Vegetables disappeared, one or two at a time. First a cucumber, then a squash, then an entire line of radishes, dug up with almost surgical precision. No nibbles, no scatter, just gone. "It's kids," Caleb said. "Kids playing garden bandits." But Nora wasn't so certain, and Matilda had started pacing again, not quite in panic, just ... vigilant. She began her dusk circuit earlier and earlier, sometimes well before the sun touched the hilltops. Her crawl space under the rosemary became her command post. From there, she watched, in stillness, with that same old sheen in her eye like a coin glinting beneath glass. And one night, just after Lena had refilled the bird bath, and the air held that warm sap smell of high summer, Matilda made a sound the family had never heard before, a staccato cluck, sharp and rhythmic. Not frantic, just patterned, deliberate. Lena froze. Caleb turned down the porch radio. The sound came again, then again, like a metronome forced into feathered throat. They followed it to the eastern fence. Dirt had been scraped away from the bottom edge, soil loose and darker than the rest. Something dug here, Nora said quietly. Matilda stood 3 feet away, feathers puffed, staring straight at the breach. Caleb knelt, hands smoothing the edges, too clean for raccoon. No prints. But Matilda's body had gone stiff, her breath barely moving her chest the same way she had stood in the brooder window all those months ago. "It's not kids," Lena whispered. The next night everyone stayed indoors, but Matilda refused. The coop, she took her place under the rosemary. Lena brought her a shallow dish of water, a strawberry, and whispered, "Don't be a hero." But Matilda only blinked, then looked back at the fence. 3 more nights, 3 more cluck alarms. Each time, the hole moved a little different angles, new attempts. Whatever it was trying. Then came morning, bright and cloudless, bees lazing in the sunflower heads, the smell of soil warming like bread in an oven. Lena stepped out early, bundled in a hoodie, a book in one hand. She paused at the top step. Something was Off dot, not broken, just unfamiliar. She walked slowly. The cucumber vines trampled slightly, the lettuce beds flattened at one edge, and the garden gate hung just slightly ajar. She felt it before she saw it, like the subtle pull of magnetism in the chest. Then came the movement, fast and lean and low against the edge of the shed. A fox, its fur sharp and copper, narrow body gliding between shadows as if it had been there forever. Lena didn't move. Couldn't, and Matilda. Matilda came from the left, no squawk, no alarm, just a furious puffed cannonball of gold feathers sprinting across the mulch, feet skittering, wings partially lifted like the cape of a tiny, enraged general. She didn't stop, didn't bluff, she charged. The fox froze, calculated, and then, possibly out of confusion or cowardice, or both, it bolted, snapped backward, tail flicking wildly. It leapt the low hedge and vanished into the trees. Beyond, silence, then a single cluck, short, sharp. Matilda stalked to the center of the path, turned herself slowly, and walked back to Lena as though she'd simply inspected a wayward vine. Later, Caleb would say he saw the shape dash past from the second-story window. Nora would say she knew the fox had been involved for days, but only one thing mattered to the girl with the hoodie and the open book pages fluttering beside her legs. Matilda had not hesitated. She had seen danger, and she had drawn a line. The garden belonged to someone, to them, to Lena and her mother's herbs, and the coop with the painted hen names beside the door, and the tiny tomato seedlings just starting to dare the sun. Matilda had defended it all, as though it were war. News spread, not in a dramatic whooshing, headlines way, just neighbor to neighbor, garden fence to fence. Did you hear that crazy chicken? Yeah, chased off a fox, saved the whole vegetable bed. Someone joked she must have grown up in the wrong barn, that she was really a goose inside, pretending, but everyone believed it. She became, in the eyes of the town, not just a curiosity, but a guardian, no more, no less. That night, Lena polished a dime until it gleamed. Caleb found an old bottle cap, hammered it flat, and looped it through a bit of twine. They hung it gently around Matilda's neck. It clinked when she walked. She didn't seem to mind. It wasn't long after the fox that Matilda's legend began to grow legs. Not literal ones. She was still her usual two-toed self. But stories do that. They grow limbs and wings, and soon they start moving on their own. It began with Mr. Halberd from 3 doors down, the one with the overgrown rhododendrons and the world's nosiest border collie. He was out walking his dog when he heard the commotion, that sharp cluck, the clatter of bottle cap against wood chip, and then a low, surprised yowl as his dog Biscuit got too close to the garden fence. She just stared him down, he told Nora the next day, shaking his head. My Biscuits met raccoons, but that hen wouldn't let him look at a tomato without permission. Then the story of the fox reached the editor of the local paper, the Willamette Gazette. He called it a feathered standoff. Lena's photo holding Matilda like a knighted dignitary made it to the front page of the life section. Right above the zucchini bread recipe, and below a very heated opinion piece about recycled rain barrels. Headline: Chicken charges fox, shields garden. Lena didn't smile in the photo. Matilda didn't blink. Neither of them needed to. A week later, a short video went around the local social page, grainy footage pulled from the family's garden cam. It showed a russet blur darting along the fence line, and a golden flash chasing close behind. Matilda charging flat-footed, wings half spread, cluck like a war cry punctuating the air before the fox dashed off screen. It wasn't high resolution. It wasn't long, but sometimes truth doesn't care how many pixels you catch it in. The video got shared 10 times, then 100, then more. Lena's school librarian recognized her in class and asked for an autograph on a post-it. At first Lena turned beat red dot, but then she glanced at Matilda's video and said, with mild confusion, "It's not that big of a deal." "It is to the tomatoes," said the librarian, and gave her a free bookmark. The garden club invited her to give a talk, Protect a Poultry, Narratives in Unlikely Guardians. Lena spoke for exactly 3 minutes, then let Matilda waddle around the dais while everyone took photos. She answered 2 questions, one about Buff Orpingtons, one about the psychological motivations for chicken courage. She said she just doesn't like things messing up her space. They gave them a seed packet and an engraved trowel. Matilda tried to peck the latter. The bottle cap necklace became a symbol of sorts, not much heavier than a breath, but it swung with purpose as Matilda patrolled the marigolds. It clinked gently as she walked. The softest metal with the fiercest meaning. Children from the community would gather by the fence to watch her. Some placed drawings in the mailbox, crayon sketches of fire-breathing dragons and caped chickens. One labeled simply Matilda. Fox Zero, an elderly woman from the retirement condos, sent over a hand-stitched patch white thread on green felt. It read, "Sentinel of the Garden, Heart of a Lion." Caleb pinned it above the coop door. No ceremony, just gentle pride. Dogs barked differently around their yard now. Not aggressively dash more, ... Cautious the terrier across the street, who once nosed through garbage and terrorized gateposts, learned to give the fence a wide berth. Twice he stepped too close and got a warning glare at Matilda. Look that could wither a weed. Even the squirrels adjusted their roots. A rare feat, considering squirrels typically adjust for no one, but Matilda had a presence, and presence, like weather, affects things. Some days Lena asked herself if she'd imagined it. All of it. The staring down, the fox, the way Matilda seemed to measure each breeze like it held information. Then she'd call, that soft two-note whistle they'd perfected. And a moment later, from behind the lavender, Matilda would appear. Not rushed, not obliging, just there, as always. On time, Lena started writing, quietly sharing their story online, a blog where she captured Matilda in moments both grand and mundane. Entries titled things like feathers, like armor, or she chased a drone, but not the mailman stories. Wrapped in soft reflection about what it meant to be small and steadfast. Other kids started commenting, sending in pictures of their own chickens, none quite like Matilda, not even close. One wrote, "Mine just sits in a basket." But maybe she's guarding something invisible. Some things don't need explaining. At the town's annual library reading hour, themed courage in every form, Matilda made her public indoor debut tucked in Nora's arms, dignified and unbaptized. Lena read a poem she'd written by hand. She doesn't bark, she doesn't chase, she doesn't flash a warning face, but when the dark slips through the gate, she stands alone and tells it, wait, they didn't boo, or laugh, or whisper. They clapped, and Matilda. She gave one short cluck that sounded suspiciously like approval, then promptly fell asleep on Lena's lap. Courage doesn't always roar, sometimes watches the perimeter, Sometimes it clicks softly. Against a garden path, beak tilted toward the world, and simply says, "Not today." The first rusted clap of thunder sounded like someone dropped a piano over the hills. Lena barely looked up from her desk, counting 1.2.3, before the window glowed white lightning. Then came the boom closer. This time her pencil danced in a nervous oval over the corner of her sketchpad. A drawing of Matilda, half finished, one clawed foot raised like mid-salute. The sky outside looked bruised, damp light filtering through purling clouds, slow and tense the way heavy weather lies in wait. The forecast had mentioned a storm. Just rain, the usual. Oregon weather rarely fussed for more than a few hours. But there was a charge in the air that made even the houseplants stand taller. Caleb and Nora were at the farmer's market, 2 towns over, something about early apples and rainproof tote bags. Back before 5, Nora had said, handing Lena a list of chores and 2 slices of banana bread tied in parchment. Storm will pass before dinner. But the wind arrived too soon, curling around corners like it knew every creak of the porch step before it groaned. Lena heard a clatter somewhere outside, muted behind glass, the garden gate rattling, the coop latch. She crossed to the window and peered down. From this angle, she could see the coop roof tremble under each gust. Feathers flicked briefly from the side, someone darting behind cover. The sky hiccuped, again another flash. Then the kind of thunder that shakes picture frames. She rushed downstairs, hoodie barely on, boots half zipped. The door flung outward, on a push of cold, damp air. Her hair whipped sideways. She squinted against the stingwas that hail. Already the garden had turned, strange colors washed out, familiar edges made foreign. The rosemary hedge bent low, rain battering it into a sway that looked like morning dot. Lena bolted for the coop. The wood shutter on the lower window banged incessantly. She pressed it back into its latch, fingers numb. "Matilda," she called. No answer, just the percussion of rain against roof, soil, skin. She crouched low and pulled the coop door open. Inside, 5 hens, clustered near the rear roost. Clementine blinked lazily, but no Matilda. Heart lurching, Lena turned, scanning the yard and saw her. Matilda wasn't in the coop. She was outside, drenched, stooped, nestled across the open doorway like a blockade made of feathers and grit. Her bottle cap necklace clinked twice in the wind before going still. Lightning backlit the sky, making every droplet halo. But even soaked through, Matilda didn't flinch. Instead, she lifted her head, slowly, met Lena's eyes with a look that said, "Not until they're all in. Not until it's safe." "Matilda," Lena breathed, stepping over puddles toward her. She crouched, reaching gently. "You don't have to," she whispered, but Matilda didn't move. Not when the wind howled. Not when a thick oak branch slammed down a few feet away, sending muddy leaves in a spray across the lavender bed. Only when Lena touched her wings. Coaxing and calm did she allow herself to be lifted. She was cold and wet, feathers clumped like wilted petals, but her eyes were steady and her chest rose slow and even. "You're a lunatic," Lena muttered. Pulling her close, Matilda clucked once faint and gravelly. The sound of a vow fulfilled. Inside the house, Lena wrapped her in an old t-shirt and a kitchen towel. She laid her near the hearth on a cushion, where embers still baked the air gentle warm. The other hens, content in their shelter, didn't cluck nor stir. But Clementine, oddly, paced to the coop door, and stared out into Nassaufen and grey. By the time Caleb and Nora returned, faces red from wind, arms full of soggy market baskets, they found Lena curled beside a bundled Matilda, both faintly steaming from drying heat. "She didn't go in," Lena said, without looking up. She waited for them, stood there like a gate. "She's limping," said Nora, crouching low. "A sprain." "Not serious," the vet confirmed it, with a soft click of tongue and a respectful murmur of, "Well, I've never seen that one before." He treated her pro bono after Lena showed him the Reading Hour article and the infamous garden cam footage. Then he sat in his truck for 5 extra minutes, just watching her through the window. "She's got the eyes," he said finally. "That in-charge kind, like an old barn owl in disguise." Matilda recovered slowly. The limp remained for weeks, faint, dignified, like a war story whispered through the rhythm of her steps. Neighbors brought by scraps of garden goods, soft pumpkin bits, warm cornbread. A retired teacher painted Matilda's portrait on a leftover shingle and left it. Leaning against the mailbox, Lena clipped it beside the coop. The storm had knocked down half a tree and a third of their trellis, but the chickens were unharmed. The garden soggy but untouched, and word traveled further than whispers this time. Someone put the security footage to music. Slow piano. Uploaded it with one word: guarded. By then, Matilda's name needed no introduction. She found her rhythm again. The limp gave her gravitas. Her patrols continued. Slower, maybe, but still sure. She perched atop the low corner post, like a feathered gargoyle surveying her realm. Eyes sharp, beak still, and wings that trembled only with the wind. And everyone, not just the family this time, watched her with new eyes. Not just a chicken, a sentinel, a soldier, a shadow who stood in the storm and said, "Not yet, not until it's safe." Autumn came quietly, the way it always does in places where trees outnumber people. The mornings thickened with mist, and the garden moved from frantic green to mellow gold, stalks crisping slowly, as if remembering how to breathe out. Matilda moved a little slower now. The slight limp she'd earned in the storm never fully left. It didn't hinder her, but it marked her grace note of endurance in the rhythm of her steps. Lena noticed as she knelt to gather fallen leaves or checked the rosemary for spiders hiding beneath the brittle tips. Matilda took longer to circle the beds, and sometimes opted to perch instead of pace. She preferred the low bench beneath the fig tree, where the sun touched first and longest, but she still watched. Some protections don't require constant motion. Presence, it turned out, could settling like mist quiet, firm, unmoving. Lena began writing more stories, mostly, some true, some imagined. Matilda always at the center. She titled the blog Feathers Like Flame, because that's what she had started to believe fierce gentleness looked like. And people started reading, not hundreds, but enough. Children from other small towns emailed drawings. One family sent a hand-knitted chicken sweater that Matilda refused to wear with great dignity. But the stories sparked light in places Lena never expected. Comments arrived like autumn. Wind, brief, honest, full of surprise. "Your chicken makes me feel brave. I read this out loud to my sister before bed. I wish I had a Matilda too." By late November, Matilda recognized specific sounds. The mail van, Nora's favorite podcast through the window, Lena's whistle, of course, which remained their private code, unchanged since the garden's first summer. Even footsteps. One afternoon, a delivery driver crossed the front path with an unfamiliar, gate-heavy shoes. irregular rhythm. Matilda rose from her nest of sun-dappled mulch, crossed the entire yard before he reached the gate, and pecked lightly at his boot. Lena called out from the porch, laughing. "She's just checking. She only lets the nice ones pass." The man glanced down at the hen, who stared up with her one raised-wing posture of judgment, then waved a nervous hand. "Message received," he said. By then, the entire block knew the rules. Matilda still didn't attack, never had. It wasn't in her nature. But her scrutiny felt like a threshold you needed to earn the right to cross that winter. She was nominated Grand Marshal of the town's tiny holiday parade, not a formal title, but a suggestion passed around until everyone agreed it simply made sense. Her float was a red wagon pulled by Lena and decorated in twinkling lights and sprigs of cedar. She perched with practiced poise beside a bushel of carrots, bottle-capped necklace gleaming like royalty made real. From the crowd came signs: "Matilda for mayor," "Hens rule." A small child held up a drawing of a fox with a red X through it. Matilda blinked once in acknowledgement. Perhaps. Inside the school, early in December, Lena entered a town-wide writing contest. Prompt: "Someone who guards what matters." Her poem, one dot. Every word came from the truth of dirt under nails, seasons and golden feathers, and how presence sometimes saves more than heroics ever could. She read it with measured voice and only looked up once when Matilda clucked from her travel crate in the wings, as if to say, "You forget a stanza." Everyone laughed. The town librarian laminated the poem and pinned it up beside the checkout desk. A teacher asked to set it to music. When asked how she knew what to write, Lena answered, "It wasn't writing. Really, I just listened." Some afternoons, when the wind was still and the air smelled like frost hiding behind pine needles, Matilda would leave the garden path and sit beside the rosemary that had once been her post of vigilance. She watched the road, the doorstep, the low swing now creaking with leaf-littered weight. Lena would sit beside her sometimes. Without speaking, it was enough. And when spring leaned its way softly back over the hilltops some months later, Matilda was still there, watching still. Strong, slightly slower, wearing her medal like a truth no one dared to question. The garden changed, as gardens do, quietly and without notes. The kale grew in smaller bunches. The rosemary went woody at the base. A creeping kind of maturity settled over the soil, a sense that the place had seen things, remembered them, and offered its peace in return. Matilda aged alongside it. By the time Lena was in high school, the hen's feathers had dulled at the fringes, shifting from gold to a faded buttercream like parchment, softened by weather and time. Her limbs still moved with a sense of purpose, but they lacked the sharp snap they once held. Her patrols shortened. The mid-morning warmth became her favorite focus, more so than perimeter inspecting or foot-chasing neighborhood pets. But her eyes remained dot-sharp, attentive. Familiar Lena noticed first that she no longer followed her down every garden row. Instead, she'd sit near the bench, watch the gate, and give that soft cluck of acknowledgement when Lena passed. Not lazy, just wise. The way the oldest sailors learned to steer from the crow's nest of memory, from instinct, beaten into muscle. She hadn't charged anything in months. There wasn't a need, but still she stayed a presence as much as a pattern. Watching, always watching. Other people began getting their own hens. Some admitted it openly, "We want one, like yours." Others played coy, thought it'd be fun for the compost. But it was clear that everyone, in some shape or form, had hoped for a Matilda of their own. None were, and that wasn't a disappointment. Just a truth that settled like dusk. Some of the hens were lovable, some allergic to fences. A few, like a particularly large Rhode Island red named Maud, had bold personalities and hilarious instincts, but none quite had the depth, the sentinel stillness, that strange, poignant ability to be both soft and unyielding at once. Still, the new chickens did bring laughter. Late summer evenings, filled with stories, swapped over porch rails. Maud laid in my shoe again. Ours keeps trying to eat rain. Lena liked those stories. She even blogged about them. She wrote about the time Matilda stared down a jack-o'-lantern unmoved, or the day she refused to retreat inside until a snow-covered shovel had been relocated from its position by the garden gate, and newer stories. To dot like how Matilda just knew which houseplants needed moving when the frost hit early, or how she developed a habit of pecking the base of Lena's backpack when she wanted company, then waddling off without waiting to see if she followed. Lena had friends, now both human and feathered. She'd grown into someone quieter on purpose rather than quiet by default. Someone who didn't mind being outside the spotlight, but didn't fear stepping into it, either. She'd started volunteering at the local animal rescue, cleaning, mostly, sketching faces on her notepad in between tasks. On the back of that sketch pad was pinned a photo, a black and white printout of a younger Lena holding Matilda in the crook of her arm, the bottle cap medal still visible, tilted just so. She carried it everywhere. It wasn't dramatic. The end, Matilda slept more. Needed gentler hands. There came a day when she didn't rise with the sunrise the way she used to. Lena found her curled neatly in the corner of the coop, not slumped, not crumpled, just settled, as though she'd folded herself like origami into the shape of a closing chapter. Wrapped in the soft linen of one of Nora's old aprons, Lena carried her to the garden, to the spot near the rosemary that had always been hers. Caleb dug gently, quietly. No speech, just the hush of ritual. They placed the bottle cap medal beside her. Months passed. The garden moved on, because it must. But not all things vanish when they leave. There's a tomato stake in the corner, now seasoned wood, slightly crooked. From the top dangles a short bit of twine and the bent bottle cap, tilted to catch the sun. When the wind moves just right, it taps gently against the stake. A tiny sound, like a memory-knocking dot. Lena still walks the garden, sometimes with rescued kittens tumbling after her. Sometimes alone. She doesn't whistle much, but when she does, she still does it the same way. Once in a while, she feels something behind her, a shape she doesn't need to turn to find. Not fear, not company, just presence. Not all guardians come on 4 legs. Some wore feathers, and they watched more than a garden. They waited with you in silence. They stood where others slipped away, and when the long line of your younger years shifts into the past, they remain, not barking, not speaking, just watching, as if to say, still, you're not alone.